Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
Mike?
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. You talk a lot about what the data are telling you and how you are dependent on the data, but in terms of forward-looking assessments of the economy, what are you hearing from CEOs or other officials around the country? What did you hear today from the regional bank presidents about what companies and consumers think about where the economy is going from here rather than looking backwards? And does that match up with what your forecasts have been and what you think the appropriate policy path should be?
So it's hard to characterize a really interesting set of discussions we had, and of course you'll see them in the minutes in 3 weeks. But I would say this: I think the comments from our Reserve Bank colleagues and from the CEOs that they talk to are pretty constructive on the economy right now. Pretty constructive, feeling that the labor market is back to normal, to the point where it's no longer that much a discussion topic in their worlds, whereas 2 years ago it was all they were talking about. So they feel like the labor market's in balance. People feel good about where the economy is. Demand is obviously pretty strong, and you're seeing 2.8% growth in the third quarter estimated. Maybe the year's 2.5%. This is a strong economy. It's actually remarkable how well the U.S. economy has been performing with strong growth, a strong labor market, inflation coming down. We're really performing better than any of our global peers, and I think that is reflected in what you hear from what I hear people hear from CEOs. I don't get to talk to a lot of CEOs in my job, but I hear what others summarize from those, and of course I hear the Reserve Bank presidents do a lot of that, and it's pretty constructive overall. Now, that's not to say there are areas of caution and things like that, but ultimately, overall, pretty positive.
Well, to follow up the areas of caution, if there were black clouds on the horizon that you identified as something you're watching, what would they be?
I think it's things like clearly geopolitical risks around the world are elevated, and just as clearly they've had relatively little effect on the U.S. economy. Now, that can change through the price of oil or otherwise, but people talk about those as something that's on the horizon all the time. But ultimately, if you look at the U.S. economy, its performance has been very good, and that's what we hear from business people, and expectation that will continue. If anything, people feel next year. I've heard this from several people that next year could even be stronger than this year.
Andrew.
Hi, it's Andrew Ackerman with the Washington Post. I just wanted to follow up on the discussion earlier on fiscal policy. Your predecessors, Greenspan and Volcker, spoke up loudly when they thought large budget deficits endangered economic or financial stability. Will you do that too? And right now we're in a period of full employment. We have large budget deficits and debt at historic highs that are rising. Is that something you'd speak out against?
So, I have said many times, no more, no less than what the predecessors you mentioned have said. And what that is that the U.S. federal government's fiscal policy is on an unsustainable path. The level of our debt relative to the economy is not unsustainable. The path is unsustainable. And we see that in, you've got a very large deficit you're at full employment, and that's expected to continue. So it's important that we, that to be dealt with. It is ultimately a threat to the economy. Now, I can say that. I don't have oversight. We don't have oversight over fiscal policy. I've said it on many occasions, just said it again.
Okay, thank you. I guess the other question is, to follow up on Victoria's question, do you believe the president has the power to fire or demote you, and has the Fed determined the legality of a president demoting at will any of the other governors with leadership positions?
Not permitted under the law.
Not what?
not permitted under the law.
Thank you.
Courtney. Courtney Brown from Axios. In response to Howard's question, you said it wasn't an ideal time to give forward guidance because of the economic uncertainties. Can you lay out what some of those uncertainties are and whether or not it includes some of the proposals that the president-elect has put out on the campaign trail, tariffs, for instance?
No, I was not referring to the new administration's policies at all, nor will I today. So what I'm just saying is, as we look ahead, we know, and I mentioned this in my statement, that the risks are two-sided. I guess I should start by saying that we think that the economy and we think our policy are both in a very good place, And, but as you look forward, you say, what are the risks? And one risk is that we would move too quickly and find ourselves having moved too quickly and inflation comes back and we lost our chance to get inflation back to 2%. So we have to avoid that risk. And to avoid that risk, that means you want to move carefully. The other risk is that we move too slowly and that we allow the labor market to weaken too much and do unnecessary damage to the labor market and to people's working lives. That says don't get behind the curve. So these two things are the two risks that we have to manage, and so we're in the middle there. We try to be in the middle and deal with manage both of those. Again, the idea is to support the strength we have in the labor market and in the economy, but also with somewhat less restrictive but still restrictive policy, enable further progress toward our 2% inflation goal. This is a thing where we're meeting by meeting, we're going to be making our assessment of what the right path is. It's not as important, the precise timing of these things is not as important as the overall arc of them. And the arc of them is to move from where we are now to a sense of a more neutral policy. We don't know exactly where that is. We only know it by its works. We're pretty sure it's below where we are now. But as we move further, there will be more uncertainty about where that is, and we're going to move carefully as this goes on, so that we can increase the chances that we will get it right.
Simon.